this exercise is really valuable in that sense, that we will learn so much about the armed forces of the Philippines, and we will learn how we will need to adapt to the new challenges, the new threats that we are facing today, and the threats that we will be facing in the future.
Over the past 3 months, the United States quietly rehearsed a new way of fighting in the Indo-Pacific, deploying one of its most advanced marine units across remote islands just 160 kilometers, or 100 miles, south of Taiwan. From the annual Balikatan exercises to the follow-on Kamandag drills, the Hawaii-based 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment spread across northern Luzon, the Babuyan Islands, and Batanes, practicing how to rapidly deploy anti-ship missiles, establish expeditionary positions, and monitor one of the world's most strategically important waterways, the Luzon Strait. This wasn't simply about improving military cooperation with the Philippines. It was about testing a completely different American approach to deterring conflict in the Western Pacific. Instead of concentrating forces at a handful of massive military bases, U.S. Marines rehearsed operating in small, highly mobile teams that could disperse across remote islands, remain difficult to detect, and, if necessary, threaten hostile warships moving through critical maritime choke points. For Washington, it's a strategy designed to strengthen deterrence along the first island chain. For Manila, it reinforces the defense of the country's northern frontier. And for Beijing, these same islands sit just outside one of China's most sensitive strategic theaters, the Taiwan Strait. So why are these quiet islands suddenly attracting the attention of military planners across the Indo-Pacific? Because once you understand what the Marines were actually practicing, you'll understand why this deployment is about far more than another military exercise. The Marines training in the northern Philippines aren't ordinary Marine units. They're the product of one of the biggest transformations in the history of the U.S. Marine Corps. A force redesigned for a battlefield that looks nothing like the wars America fought over the past 2 decades. For generations, Marines were trained to launch large amphibious assaults, storm beaches, and seize territory with tanks, artillery, and overwhelming combat power. That doctrine proved itself from World War II to the Middle East. But modern warfare changed. Today's battlefields are watched by satellites, drones patrol the skies around the clock, and long-range precision missiles can strike targets hundreds of kilometers away. Large concentrations of troops and equipment have become far easier to detect and far more vulnerable to destroy. So the Marine Corps asked a difficult question: how do you survive on a battlefield where the enemy can see almost everything? The answer became Force Design 2030. Instead of building bigger formations, the Marine Corps began creating smaller, faster, and far more mobile units designed to operate inside heavily contested environments. Rather than depending on massive military bases, these forces could disperse across islands, relocate quickly, and continue fighting while remaining difficult to detect.
Make some room, let's go! Let's go, sir, let's go.
At the heart of that transformation is the Marine Littoral Regiment, or MLR. Unlike a traditional Marine regiment, the MLR isn't built to capture large cities or hold vast stretches of territory. It's designed to operate from remote coastlines and islands using advanced sensors, air defenses, and long-range precision missiles to detect hostile naval forces, share targeting data across the joint force, and, if necessary, strike enemy ships far beyond the horizon. In many ways, it's less like a traditional infantry unit and more like a mobile network of sensors and precision weapons. And nowhere is that new way of fighting being tested more extensively than in the northern Philippines. Because once you look at the map, everything suddenly begins to make sense. So why are US Marines spending months training on islands that most people couldn't find on a map? Because once you look at the geography, everything changes. Open Google Earth and zoom into the northern tip of the Philippines. The first islands you'll find are Batanes, a quiet chain of rugged cliffs, small fishing villages, and fewer than 20,000 residents. At first glance, they don't look like the kind of place that could influence the balance of power in Asia. But then, zoom out. Just 160 kilometers, or 100 miles, to the north lies Taiwan. Between them stretches the Luzon Strait, one of the busiest and most important waterways in the Indo-Pacific. Now zoom in again. Cutting through the strait is the Bashi Channel, a deep water corridor connecting the South China Sea to the Pacific Ocean. Every day, commercial ships carrying energy, raw materials, and manufactured goods pass through these waters. But military planners see something else. They see one of the few natural gateways between China's near seas and the open Pacific. That's why this region sits at the heart of the first island chain. A line of islands stretching from Japan through the Ryukyu Islands, Taiwan, and the northern Philippines before reaching Borneo. For decades, military strategists have viewed this island chain as one of the defining geographic features of the Western Pacific. Any navy seeking to move large surface fleets or submarines into the wider Pacific must carefully navigate these narrow maritime passages. That changes everything. From Batanes, Itbayat, and the Babuyan Islands, surveillance systems can watch activity across the Luzon Strait. Missile units can help hold critical sea lanes at risk. And Allied forces can strengthen maritime awareness across one of the world's busiest maritime corridors. Suddenly, these aren't just remote islands anymore. They're the gateway between the South China Sea and the Pacific Ocean. And that's why military planners in Washington, Manila, Beijing, Tokyo, and Taipei are all paying closer attention to this small chain of islands than ever before. Because in geopolitics, the most valuable territory isn't always the biggest. Sometimes, it's the place everyone has to pass through. Understanding the geography is only half the story. The real question is, what can US Marines actually do once they arrive on these islands? The answer isn't another aircraft carrier. It isn't a massive military base. It's a missile launcher that can disappear almost as quickly as it appears. It's called the Navy Marine Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System, or NMESIS. At first glance, it doesn't look particularly threatening. It's mounted on a small unmanned vehicle that can be transported by aircraft, landing craft, or even civilian ferries. But what it carries has fundamentally changed how the Marine Corps plans to fight at sea. NMESIS fires the Naval Strike Missile, a precision-guided weapon developed by Norway's Kongsberg Defence and Aerospace and produced in partnership with RTX. With a range of more than 185 kilometers, it allows Marines operating from small islands to threaten warships far beyond the horizon. But the missile itself is only part of the story. Imagine a warship entering the Luzon Strait. No radar locks onto it from the shore. No large military base gives away its position. Instead, satellites, drones, patrol aircraft, and allied sensors quietly track its movement. Somewhere on a nearby island, a hidden launcher receives the coordinates. It doesn't search for the target. It already knows where the target is. Within moments, the missile is launched. And before the enemy can react, the launcher has already moved to another position. That's the real power of missiles. It's designed to shoot, move, and disappear, making it exceptionally difficult to locate before it strikes, or to destroy after it fires. Now imagine not one launcher, but several, spread across Batanes, Itbayat, and the Babuyan Islands. Together, they could help hold key approaches to the Luzon Strait at risk while operating as part of a larger network of allied sensors and precision weapons. And that's exactly what the Marines rehearsed during Balikatan and Kamandag. They weren't simply practicing how to fire missiles. They were proving they could build a mobile, survivable network capable of monitoring one of the Indo-Pacific's most important maritime corridors. Because in modern warfare, the most dangerous weapon isn't always the one with the longest range. It's the one your opponent never knows is there, until the missile is already on its way. But the missiles are only half the story. The real breakthrough is where and how the Marines plan to fight. For decades, American military power relied on massive bases filled with aircraft, fuel, ammunition, and thousands of troops. The problem? Everyone knows where those bases are. In an age of satellites, drones, and long-range missiles, fixed positions are easier than ever to find and target. So instead of building one giant fortress, the Marine Corps is doing the opposite. It's spreading small, highly mobile units across dozens of islands. This concept is called Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations, or EABO. Marines move on to remote islands, establish temporary positions, monitor the surrounding seas, support missile targeting, and, if necessary, launch precision strikes. Before an enemy can respond, they pack up and move again. Think of it as a network instead of a base. One island hosts missile launchers, another operates radar, a third relays targeting information. Together, they create a web that's far harder to find and far harder to destroy. That strategy was put to the test during Kamandag 2026. And one detail stood out. Instead of relying only on military ships, the 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment used commercial Philippine ferries to move troops and equipment between Calayan, Bataan, and Itbayat. At first, that sounds unusual. But it's exactly the point. Using civilian vessels allows Marines to move quickly, reach smaller islands, and disperse without depending entirely on traditional military transport. The goal wasn't to defend one island. It was to turn an entire island chain into a connected defensive network. Because in this strategy, you may know the missiles are out there. Finding them before they move is the real challenge. By now, one thing should be clear. This isn't just about defending the Philippines. It's also about shaping the balance of power in the Western Pacific. For China, the first island chain has long been more than a line on the map. Before many PLA Navy warships and submarines can operate freely in the Pacific, they must pass through narrow waterways like the Luzon Strait and the Bashi Channel. That's why these islands matter. As the United States and its allies strengthen their presence across the first island chain, Beijing sees a growing network of sensors, missile units, and partner forces positioned near some of its most important maritime routes. At the same time, China has spent decades building its own anti-access or area denial, or A2 or AD, capabilities, long-range missiles, advanced air defenses, and a rapidly modernizing navy designed to discourage outside military intervention near its coastline. In other words, both sides are adapting to each other. Every exercise, every missile deployment, and every new military capability is part of a broader competition over who can operate and who can deter the other in the Western Pacific. That doesn't mean conflict is inevitable, but it does explain why places like Batanes, Calayan, and Itbayat are now drawing attention from military planners in Washington, Manila, and Beijing alike. Because in the Indo-Pacific, control isn't just about firepower. It's about who can control the sea lanes that everyone depends on. So far, we've talked about military strategy. But what if the crisis everyone is preparing for actually happens? If conflict were ever to erupt across the Taiwan Strait, the Philippines wouldn't be a distant observer. It would be one of the first countries to feel the consequences. Just 160 kilometers from Taiwan, the Batanes Islands are the closest Philippine territory to the strait. Almost overnight, the Luzon Strait could become a corridor for military operations, humanitarian missions, and civilian evacuations. But the stakes go far beyond geography. That's why the Marcos administration's national security policy states that instability across the Taiwan Strait would inevitably affect the Philippines. Not only because of geography, but because of the lives of thousands of Filipinos living just across the water. For Washington, the northern Philippines could become a key hub for intelligence, logistics, and allied operations. For Manila, it's about protecting both national security and its own people. And for the people of Batanes, their quiet island home could suddenly become the Philippines' first line of response in a regional crisis. Because if Taiwan changes, Batanes won't be far behind. So, what happens next? The honest answer is, no one knows. But based on current trends, 3 realistic scenarios stand out. The first is the most likely. The United States and the Philippines continue expanding what they're already doing. More Balikatan and Kamandog exercises, more Marine Littoral Regiment deployments, and deeper military cooperation to strengthen deterrence. The second is a gradual expansion of capabilities. As EDCA sites continue to develop, northern Philippine facilities could support more advanced sensors, stronger air defenses, and additional long-range missile systems, enhancing rotational operations without becoming permanent U.S. bases. The third is the most serious. If a crisis over Taiwan were ever to escalate, the preparations we've seen in recent years could accelerate dramatically. Forces, logistics, and surveillance assets could move into the northern Philippines much faster, making islands like Batanes, Itbayat, and Calayan even more important. Which path becomes reality will depend on decisions made in Washington, Manila, Beijing, and Taipei. But one thing is already clear. The deployment of the 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment wasn't just another military exercise. It was a preview of how the United States and its allies believe future conflicts in the Indo-Pacific could be fought. Not with a few massive bases, but with small, mobile forces operating across a chain of strategically located islands. Because in the Indo-Pacific, the smallest islands can shape the biggest decisions. For decades, Batanes was simply the Philippines' northernmost frontier. Today, it has become one of the Indo-Pacific's most important strategic frontiers. Not because the islands changed, but because the world around them did. And that's why the U.S. Marines are now training where few people were looking just a few years ago.